Well, this is a very serious show on which we like to solve the problems of the world. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this Right Angle episode is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com, a very serious group of people. I saw a headline, gentlemen, recently that I guess first startled me and then gave me hope for a better planet. This was from a column written by Ellie Bufkin at thefederalist.com, and the headline was 5 Ways SNL Could Actually Appeal to Conservatives. And the inspiration for this was, of course, the recent firing of Shane Gillis, a comedian who was hired for all of 72 hours and then fired when it turned out that he had said something inappropriate. Imagine a comedian saying something inappropriate some time ago. And in any case, there was a piece in Variety.com suggesting that Shane Gillis had been offered the position because he might appeal to conservatives, even though he was no fan of President Trump's and had no apparent political agenda. Apparently, it was enough to say he told stories about rural life and he was white. And so therefore, that should appeal to conservatives, and going against the hiring of people just because of who they were, what color, and what sex, and all that kind of stuff. In any case, Stephen Green, you have occasionally watched video, TV shows, movies, and things like that. I was wondering if you could add to the list that I'm not going to read from Ellie Bufkin of ways that you think that Saturday Night Live could actually appeal to conservatives. And I guess we should start with the assumption. Do you agree with the assumption that maybe they're not doing much to appeal to conservatives at this point?
Well, I don't want them to appeal to anybody or anything other than the funny bone. That's their job, to go where the humor is. So if I would make one suggestion, it's find the comedy. Don't worry about the agenda. Don't worry about who you're going to please or who you're going to offend. Find the comedy. SNL in its not ready for primetime players heyday always did this. Some of their funniest bits were making fun of Richard Nixon because there was a lot of comedy to be mined out of Richard Nixon. But Dan Aykroyd did the world's worst Jimmy Carter, and that was hysterical too. Jimmy Carter, is 6'4" Dan Aykroyd with a mustache, mind you. I mean, just now they rely on the makeup and stuff to sell it, and you don't need it. If Dan Aykroyd can play Jimmy Carter, then anybody can do anything. And Dan Aykroyd made you laugh. His bit on inflation. Haven't you wanted to smoke $100 cigar? Well, with inflation, you can. And it's just, it was a great bit. And not because they were making fun of a Democrat, but because they were mining comedy out of a horrible economic situation. Phil Hartman's Ronald Reagan was hysterical.
Brilliant. Yeah, that was one of the best things they ever did.
Absolutely. If you had to pick top 10 sketches, Phil Hartman as Reagan the Evil Mastermind would certainly be in my top 10, maybe in my top 5. And again, it's not funny because they were making fun of him for being a Republican. They went to where the humor was and they mined it, and they mined it deep. It was great. One of the funniest bits they ever did. The media always likes to think that they're kind of SNL's darlings, but there was a sketch they did during the first Gulf War in 1991 with Kevin Nealon playing the Pentagon spokesman. He's got the uniform on. He's a major, a colonel or something. Yeah. And you know the bit. And he's fielding all of these stupid questions that, of course, he can't answer. And he's saying, well, that's confidential information. I'm afraid I can't answer that. And the questions get more and more detailed until they finally cut to somebody in full Arab headdress regalia, dark sunglasses, completely masking his identity, asking for the numbers and exact locations of all of your troops in Saudi Arabia.
At what time will the invasion begin? And exactly where will the invasion be launched from?
Exactly.
Those kind of questions. It was great.
Stuff you could never, ever answer in a million years. And it was funny, not because they were making fun of the Pentagon or making fun of the press, which they were, but because they went to where the comedy is. And they've really gotten away from that. It's about getting the clapter instead of the laughter. And
yeah, the clapter.
To borrow a phrase from the left, that's not funny.
Daryl Hammond's Bill Clinton was awful great too.
It occurs to me, Bill, that years ago, and this is obviously displaying my dotage, but years ago, I can't think of a single moment where I had any clue what political party Carol Burnett was part of, or Tim Conway, or Harvey
Right.
Korman, or frankly
Or
anybody
Johnny
else
Carson,
on TV.
yeah.
It's just not something that came up. And yet we're in a different age. You just wonder whether the audience demands this kind of political slant, and that the people who are up late on a Saturday night want this kind of thing. If not, Bill, what would you suggest that Saturday Night Live could do to appeal to more conservatives?
Cancel itself.
They're on a roll now, Bill. It's 45 years. You can't stop now.
No, this is that in itself is a thing. When I heard about the firing of the conservative Saturday Night Live member, I heard the news through a tin can connected to a string. I was sitting on a bridge with my banjo, and just twinging away there as conservatives are wont to do. But I'm not kidding about the cancel yourself. The whole point of when I first saw Saturday Night Live, the first thing I saw was Chevy Chase undressing. He was wearing a bra and like a, garter belt. I just couldn't believe it was on TV. I couldn't believe it. But the whole point of Saturday Night Live was to be edgy and young and hip. And you can't be edgy and young and hip for 45 years. It's just not possible. The show needs to go. And another walking corpse that needs to be put out of its misery is The Simpsons, which during its golden age was the funniest television ever in history, ever. But that show for 25, 30 years now has just been lurching along. And it's like watching somebody really care about in a coma, I mean, it's horrible. It needs to go. With all of that said, I think there's one thing that I think is kind of interesting, and that is that I think all entertainment, all movies are inherently conservative because it's a hero with a gun and a fast car, and nobody wants to see movies about committees or guys driving Priuses. But at the same time, I think virtually all comedy is the loose making fun of the strict, and
it was Groucho.
And so it's not something that you can easily invert and say, well, how come there aren't conservatives making fun of liberals? Well, because we're the uptight guys who go to work and pay our taxes and make the world go round, and they're the smart ass guys that sleep till 3 p.m. And you can't really invert that fundamental thing. But with all of that said, in the time that Saturday Night Live has been on the air, Republicans used to be the uptight, rich guys, and Democrats were the long-haired swingers. And now it's the Democrats who are the uptight rich guys, and they're worried about all these other things. And you said something offensive, so we're going to fire you from the show. Turns out he was the actual show's conservative because he didn't even make it to the air.
You wonder whether it's the source material that makes things so difficult these days for people writing comedy, because I imagine going back to the 1970s, even in the early days, they'd watch TV, they'd read the newspaper, they'd see what was out in popular movies, and then they'd go from there, kind of like Mad Magazine used to spoof movies that were out. And if you've got a news operation that doesn't necessarily skew hard one way or the other, then you're just making fun of whoever's in the news and whatever the general stories are. But if the news that you're drawing upon is the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, if that's your source material, then doing comedy about that is going to be inherently slanted in a particular direction. Now, they can fight this, and there's no excuse for that. Real comedians today look at material and just say, what is funny here? They don't say, who am I trying to persuade? What am I trying to sell? How can I get people to hate this guy or love that woman? They're literally looking at it and saying, what's the funny thing here? And you can go back to, the 1950s with Sid Caesar or Bob and Ray.
Bob and Ray, I'm so glad you said that.
Who understood the inherently funny brokenness of humanity, the way that they could put together a sketch about apparently nothing. It didn't have to be a news story. It could be a guy taking his dog to the vet. And then they give the dog some peanut butter and they make it look like the dog is talking. I mean, that was hilarious. Now, I'm not saying you got to go back and do my grandfather's humor, but what I am saying, Saturday Night Live, is you want me to stay up late at night, you're going to have to get some endorphins flowing through my body. And the way to do that is not to see how you can immediately piss off half the country, but it's to say, gee, I wonder if we could all just laugh. I mean, imagine if you got this real sort of the most progressive possible mission you could imagine. Let's see peace on earth. Let's have a wonderful peace on earth kind of show. Well, the way you do that is by letting everyone laugh, not having one group laugh while the other group winces. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.